Hello, everyone. The Hangout on Air is now live. Welcome to Talking About Survivor. I am Christiana Ellis.
And I'm Mike McSteen.
Tonight, we are going to talk about Survivor Kaoh Rong, Episode 12. We're coming up towards the end of the season. After this one, there's only one more regular episode and then the finale.
Yep.
So this episode... It featured some good stuff, but it wasn't quite the heights of excitement in the way that the last couple were. But there's definitely a lot of good intrigue here, leading into what I think is going to be an exciting finish for the season.
Yes, I agree.
Do you have any general thoughts you want to cover before we get into the play-by-play?
Not.
It's okay if you don't.
No, because there's nothing that really struck me as.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my notes right now to see if there was anything that stood out.
Well, certainly we'll cover stuff as we go.
Yeah.
We did have a little bit of feedback. We got a YouTube comment from Kajani292000 saying, I enjoy your recap, also your movie talk. Please keep it up. Thank you. And then we also got a comment from Mike K. from SoCal saying, sorry I haven't found time to leave comments in the last few weeks. I was even called out by Mike to do research in 2 podcasts, but I was busy at the reality rally one weekend and doing taxes the next weekend. Brief insertion here. We don't want to take you for granted. I mean, we love hearing from you, and your contributions are always value added. But we understand that it's not like this is your day job is to do Survivor research for us. We do appreciate whenever you do have time to comment for us, though.
Yeah, and those call-outs were with a smile, of course.
Of course, yeah. And I think he knows that too. But it's good to go ahead and say those things out loud sometimes, I think. But so in any case, he continues, just a quick comment about the immunity idol and the voting advantage. The note for both clearly says that the last time you can use the immunity and the extra vote is when there are 5 people left in the game. Ty has to use both by the end of the next episode, number 13, on May 11th, or they will expire. As we know, the extra vote is now off the table, but it's good to know that it's, not that we doubted that the rules were established, but it is good to know what they are.
Yes.
Yeah. So, speaking of the idol, as we started this episode, Ty is, I think, flooded with relief endorphins that despite not playing his idol, he was not voted out. Things went the way he hoped, and he started to run at the mouth a little bit, I think, unaware that Jason standing right there is maybe not the right audience for him to be talking about how pleased he is that it went the way he wanted. And, even though he got some votes, I didn't play my idol and it worked out. I'm okay. And Jason's standing right there going, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good job.
Yeah. Well, there, Ty.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Jason is continuing to do, at least at this point, a good job of keeping a lid on publicly displaying his emotions about the game at this point, in the sense that to the extent that he is mad or upset, he is not showing it, which is good, although, as we'll get into later, just bottling it up instead of trying to channel it into something productive is not really helpful either.
Right.
But in any case, he pitches to Sydney and Michelle that he's a good guy to take to the final 3 because obviously nobody likes him. I guess that's his reasoning. That seems, I don't know, that
Well, I feel like he was playing to what they were already kind of.
Yeah.
I think whether they mentioned it first or not, he definitely knew. He got that feeling from them.
Yeah. Well, and to be sure, I think it's also true that even if he doesn't think it's true, that's the argument most likely to convince them. Whereas Michelle, though, is not being very receptive, just especially, I think, because in this last episode, with her agreeing to vote out Julia, who was previously her ally, it's got to be feeling like, I just went through a lot to kind of prove to them that I was actually loyal to them. So why would I go through all that trouble and then only now go against it for you? Why would I do that? But, you know.
But he didn't have another argument, so
Yeah.
he has to float what he has.
Mm-hmm. But in any case, Michelle is definitely feeling at this point that she does not want to put doubt into the alliance that she just managed to build and defend. Meanwhile, Ty is going to Joe and Aubrey. Those are apparently the two people he has decided at this point that he wants to be his final three. To the point where he tells them about his extra vote, and they discuss how if the three of them can stay tight and stay close, then it's possible that they could really just force themselves to 4. They can't necessarily guarantee that they will be able to get that fourth person out and be the final three, because that person might win immunity or something. But at the very least, they should be able to get to 4, almost guaranteed, if the three of them can stay together. Because when you have 6 people, if they have 3 plus his extra vote, then they could do that. He's ignoring the possibility that someone else might have a hidden idol that would be played by surprise. But I think maybe they're pretty sure that the idols are all accounted for now.
Yeah, being that they went home with 2 people.
Yeah, which I think, as we've previously discussed, we believe that they don't get rehidden when they're not played. But in any case, if they're pretty sure that the idols are accounted for and that there's not going to be some other surprise twist, they use the extra vote to do 4 to 3 from 6 to 5, and 4 votes to 3 votes when going from 6 to 5. And then he uses his idol to go from 5 to 4, which to some extent doesn't really guarantee for Joe and Aubrey, just guarantees for Ty. But the 3 of them together, if they're voting together, then they have 3 votes against 5. So the idol isn't really what gets them to 4 at that point.
Right.
But so in any case, given that those are the 3 people he's that Joe and Aubrey are who he wants to be with. And then his choice of who to target seems to be between Jason and Michelle, which leaves Sydney out of it. And I can't help but wonder what his thinking is with regard to Sydney. You know what I mean? Because Sydney seems like a distinct threat to me at this point, and why she would not even be on his list is interesting, unless it's maybe just that he thinks that would be a non-starter with Aubrey.
Potentially, and we have to remember that these are edited, and he may have said something about her as well, but because he never really went with it, it didn't matter to leave it in there.
Well, yeah, it's also true that in a lot of ways, and I suspect you'll agree, whatever game strategy Ty was upholding for a while has kind of started to fall apart. And I don't even mean strategy like a plan that's not working, as much as his ability to keep the balls in the air kind of started to falter. in this episode, I think. Especially just because, like, as much as he sort of wants Jason's forgiveness, like the reason I think that he's mentioning Michelle and Jason is because Jason makes him feel uncomfortable now. So he wants to get him out of the picture so he doesn't have to deal with that anymore. Which, again, from an emotional perspective, is entirely reasonable.
But to your point, I think that's what's happened to Ty's game, is it has just devolved.
Yeah.
Now that it's like the fact that he now gets to play with who he wants to play with. He's equipped to get himself pretty far just because of his advantages.
Mm-hmm.
He played so long in an uncomfortable situation where he liked the guys, but he didn't like what he had to do to be a part of that alliance.
Mm-hmm.
He's just throwing all of that out the window, and it's just like, I'm going to do what I feel like. And he's not saying it that way, but that's basically what has happened.
Yeah, exactly. He kind of got too comfortable.
Yeah.
I think this idea that, if we just stay together, we are guaranteed the 4, made him just a little bit too confident in a way that was off-putting to others. And as far as Michelle being next and not even mentioning Sydney, it seems like that goes back to, or skipping ahead to the end anyway. He says how, as far as he's concerned, Michelle was never really part of the alliance. It was, and he has a point there in the sense that both Julia and Michelle were left out of the plan when he made his move. And just because Michelle now is insisting that she's with them,
right? When really they just needed her vote last time. Like, he's not.
Yeah, and so from his perspective, it's easy to see why Jason and Michelle, not for strategic reasons, but just for his own comfort reasons, they're the ones that he feels like are not my team. My team is these people that I've made a move to be with and I'm working with now. And maybe Joe and Aubrey are who I want to be in the final 3 with, but Sydney's part of that team still. But Jason is definitely not part of the team because he was the other team when I switched. And Michelle was kind of unaffiliated and is now just trying to ride the wave.
Yep.
So he's not. Yeah, I mean, it's not terrible, but he definitely lost some perspective, I think.
Yes.
We have a gameplay strategy intermission here when Ty finds a big old grub and they are all impressed and give it to Mark the chicken and just continuing to enjoy Mark the chicken. It is impressive, honestly, that Ty's relationship, not only with the chicken, but with everybody else, is such that this group of starving people is not eating the chicken that they have.
Yep.
But hey, that's saying something. It's almost a shame that Ty's cockiness kind of let him get a little overextended there, because he really does have this sort of base level affection, I think, from almost everybody.
Yeah. And
until he started acting like he could just dictate what everybody else's votes should be without, and it's the same error that we see lots of times, which is forgetting to take account for other people making their own moves.
Right.
You are just assuming that everybody is in this to have you win, which, obviously nobody would say that that's what they think if you called them on it in those terms, but they fail to account for the possibility that other people are going to actively be making their own moves at the same time that you make yours.
Yep.
Jason complains to Joe that nobody's playing anymore, and it's interesting, and I think given that Joe has not exactly been Mr. Strategy throughout the season.
Yeah, Joe's not played ever.
Yeah. At the same time, though, I think that he just nailed exactly what Jason was saying, though, which is you are only complaining because the way the play has gone, you're on the bottom. So the fact that nobody wants to let you up from the bottom is why you're saying that nobody is wants to play anymore.
Right.
It's kind of like, no, it's not that nobody wants to play, it's that nobody wants to play with you. And
we've seen that happen before.
What?
We've seen that happen before where players have complained, oh, well, no one wants to play. And it's like, yeah, I just don't want to play with you.
Yeah. They want to go ahead and get you out of the way so that they can proceed to play some more.
Yep.
But at the same time, we can get it, but it's also, we can understand, and I think Joe nailed it exactly, that it's really kind of a sour grapes attitude, and honestly is kind of defeatist. You know what I mean? Now, again, from a human being perspective, it's easy to understand why someone in his position would feel that way. Doesn't make it constructive gameplay, though. In any case, relatively late in the game, Jason decides to play the lazy card for reasons. Now, did you buy that there was any strategy there at all, or was it really just what we've talked about before, which is trying to put some sort of a strategy spin on the fact that you are going to sulk because you're unhappy with how things are going?
Oh, yeah. That's what I felt like.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not even the first time for him, right? I mean, that was what Scott and Jason were doing with their whole thing of pouring out the water and hiding the axe and the machete. It just occurred to me, did they ever recover those? I don't remember if we've seen them since.
I feel like we would have heard if they were still missing them.
Well, but I don't, at this point, Jason couldn't have gone and brought them back.
That's what I mean. I'm sure they've come back, and we just didn't hear about it.
Yeah. In any case, his whole rationale here is that if he is sufficiently unpleasant, then people will bring him to the end as someone who won't get votes. And I'm thinking,
and
yeah, but then you won't get any votes.
Yeah.
It's like, talk about someone playing for second place or third place, and depending. I mean, that's where your whole plan. That said, the only grace note that I'll offer him in that idea is that he has proven that he can talk pretty well. Yes. So it may well be that he thinks he could win people over in the jury. Or it may also just be that he hopes that he would try, but feels like this is literally the only strategy that even gets in there.
Right. And maybe he thinks, okay, if this can get me through one vote, then I can rebuild those relationships. Mm-hmm. When the numbers when things are a little bit more muddy, I can go back to and not be the guy that just goes because people want to get voted off. Mm-hmm. Maybe he was thinking this is a one-time deal. Let's just get to the next one.
Yeah.
Because nothing else is going to work for me right now.
Right, yeah. You're waiting for your opportunity. You're waiting for the splinter, the wedge that you can exploit. Because it has to come. So, in any case, we get to the reward challenge, and it's this super cool floating maze thing where they're balancing around the platform to move the ball through the maze. I loved that. I thought that was so great.
Yes. Yeah, because there was a teamwork component, a communication component, a balance component. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fatigue component. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and as we saw too, that especially when you needed to get the ball to go into a more central circle, towards the center into the next layer, that required some significant coordination. So certainly teamwork, like, is not only a factor, but like it's absolutely critical in some of those places. You really can't just have one person who knows how to do it and the others following along. They really kind of have to all be on the same page.
Yep.
That's kind of what we saw with the team of Joe, Aubrey, and Sydney, is that at the very least, Joe seemed to feel that he knew what to do, and he felt that Aubrey and Sydney were not following his instructions. So this is also where we saw Joe a little bit slow with the swimming, which, again, for his age, he's doing pretty good. I really don't have any problems there. But, it's not a reason to keep him either, necessarily. You know what I mean? So in any case,
to the same point that, Jason was making, like, Joe's not going to say this, like, he's not playing this way, but as far as the other people's mindsets, like, Joe can't win.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe never deceives you with his vote.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's going to keep voting with you and he can't beat you, why would you ever get rid of him?
Yeah. Right. Well, and not only that, but like that puts Jason in a tough spot, because it's kind of like
we have a guy that's guaranteed to vote with us that already can't beat us.
Yeah. Like, what do we need you for?
Yeah, we have that guy, and he's loyal to us.
Mm-hmm. And if anything, he might get more votes than you would, just on the basis of he has not been the guy who's been hiding tools and pouring water on the fire and pissing people off in quite the same way. Yeah. But so in any case, the team that wins is Ty, Michelle, and Jason. They win the visit to the local wildlife refuge with the picnic, and of course, I think everybody's happy to have Ty get to be on that reward, just because it seems like he'd be into it. Or I say everyone, I was.
Yeah.
I will. Oh, my one last note related to the challenge, though, is once it's been called, there's a shot of Joe sitting kind of dejectedly on the maze, just going, "You dumb ball," which I can relate, but was also amused by.
Yes.
You dumb ball. Yeah, just the ball. If only they had a smarter ball. Ty is excited to go on the reward, but he expresses concern to the camera that the team will fall apart while he's gone, which, was an interesting way to put it, because what he really kind of means is that the other two people of his core three are going to be together away from him. So when he says the team will fall apart, it's kind of more specifically, I'm worried that maybe they're not really with me at all and they're going to do something.
Yep.
That's kind of what happens when you get to the point where your team is really only going to be 3, maybe 4 people. Back at camp, so this is where Joe starts getting bossy and annoying to Sydney especially, but Aubrey too, to some extent. Do you think it was because he was embarrassed about the challenge, or is it more just everybody's kind of on frayed nerves because they've been exhausted? They've been out there for almost a month, right?
It would have to be now, yeah.
Yeah. So is it just frayed nerves, or, like they're all just a little bit raw, or do you think it's, or do you think specifically he was bummed about feeling like he didn't do well in the challenge?
I think that I'm going to cheat here and say I think it's probably both. He's at the edge, like he's got those frayed and raw nerves, and then he didn't perform well in something that he felt like he had a shot at because it wasn't like a totally physical one.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was bummed, and when you get bummed and you already have, you've got all these other emotions and things at bay, and then you get bummed, like they come flooding in, and that's when you end up acting like that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in any case, though, he is pretty determined that work needs to be done when he says and how he says, and that everybody else needs to just listen to him because he knows what needs to happen. And Sydney in particular is not appreciating that. Aubrey is not quite as annoyed by his behavior, but is certainly very aware of how annoyed Sydney is getting.
Right. Well, and I think another part of it, too, is probably since he did know how to solve the challenge, but he was an ineffective leader and communicator, he probably defaulted back to the only way in which he knows how to lead, which this is a guess, but I'm thinking as a guy of that age who is in a federal agency, he probably has learned to lead by authority as opposed to, enabling people. Because that you see that sometimes in not just with older generations in general, but especially in public industry, military and state and all that type of stuff. Those are even slower to evolve. And you can't lead that way anymore. You can't lead by dictating because you have authority. And so you tell people what to do and then they go do it. Like if you want people to effectively do things nowadays, you have to engage them in the reasons why they should want to do it. That's just a part of the deal now. And so that's what I was kind of thinking at this point was, just barking orders at people in the challenge wasn't working. But when he got back to camp, then he could do that again. And that, he was doubling down on trying to lead, quote unquote.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah. So this is where I was continuing to really like Aubrey's game, though, just in the sense of having a solid plan, but always trying to kind of stay on your toes and be aware of what could go wrong. And attempting to forestall that, to stave off splintering if you can. So, if her real plan, as it seems like maybe it is to, as Ty is suggesting, get to 4 with herself, Joe, and Sydney, or excuse me, herself, Joe, Ty, and Sydney, and then whether or not she's really thinking the same 3 that Ty is. I would be if I was her, meaning I would rather have Ty in the end than Sydney, in the sense that while Ty's a nice guy, I think he would be easily flustered in a final tribal council situation.
And he's pissed off a lot of the people that are on the jury. So.
Yeah. Whereas Sydney, I think, could really come out swinging in terms of being able to own her play, and having played strong and made moves and been strategic all along, really.
I think it's going to be very tough for Ty, given his, like you said, his his tendency to get flustered. For him to have to make a case as to why Scott, Jason, Nick, should forgive him and why it was the right moves, I don't know that he can make that case.
Right.
And even if they were open to letting him, I don't think he's good enough at it. And so there's 3 right off the bat.
Well, not to mention the fact that if he's in there with Aubrey's played a much better game strategically.
Oh, yeah. And Aubrey will get Neil's vote. Aubrey's very likely to get the Nick, Jason, and Scott vote? Because what are there 4 jury members right now? Is it just Nick?
Well, we had Julia and Debbie.
Oh, and Julia and Debbie. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who aren't necessarily like predisposed to vote for Ty right now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think that, like, Debbie is probably not happy about being, put out by Aubrey, but I also think that she strikes me as someone inclined to want to reward the best gameplay at the end, regardless. Yeah. But in any case, yeah, there's while Ty has a likability to him, I think as the game has gotten more difficult, he's not able to maintain that, because it's easy to be likable when you're sort of just carefree and not doing anything.
Yeah.
But no one is going to reward that strategically, but he's having trouble walking the balance of starting to make moves, but then also be able to handle the fact that not everyone is going to like the move that you made. I was interested, though, that at the refuge with the picnic, that he was basically pretty pragmatic about the idea of, like, normally I wouldn't eat meat, but we're starving right now, so I'm, it's right there. I'm not gonna.
I did like that, yeah.
Yeah, because it's one thing to be like, there's principles, but there's also the idea of rigidity and inflexibility in those principles suggests that they're not actually very well examined.
Right. Yeah, and the point of not eating meat is because you love all living things and you don't want to eat them if they have already been cooked.
Mm-hmm. You're starving. You need it. It's right there. It will probably go to waste if you don't eat it. Is different than saying, well, what do you order when you go out to dinner?
Right.
But so they meet an elephant and some monkeys, and that's always good fun. I want to meet an elephant someday. That would be fun. Like, not just to see one from a distance at a zoo, but to, like, pet one and that sort of thing, like they did in this. There are probably things I could do to make that happen if I've made it a priority. But in any case.
Typically, there is, yeah.
Yeah. Typically, there is.
Yeah, most things, if you made it a priority, there are many things you can accomplish. Not an elephant in particular.
Yeah, I guess that's what kind of tips me, was like, wait, so typically with elephants, if you make it a priority.
Yeah. You want. Yeah. And you make them a priority.
They'll remember. That's what they do.
Yes.
Yeah. But anyway, that it's a fun little scene that I don't really have specific notes about that beyond just finding it fun. But I guess this is also where we had an interesting confessional from Michelle, talking about Jason, just in the sense of observing that he's acting nice, and he can be nice when he sort of turns it on, or when it's like for him, like when he's playing with these monkeys. But she's also just feeling like that doesn't mean that the evil side of the guy who is pouring out the fire and that sort of stuff, that that doesn't, it's still real. Just because he has a good side too, doesn't make the evil side not real. I don't know, evil, I felt like, is too strong a word. It's not what I would use.
No.
Selfish, sure. Maybe even a little mean-spirited. But I think to some extent that's just coming from the idea of being selfish, inconsiderate. But there were a few times where, like, he was really just, like, even before the whole stuff with Scott, like, he was just a jerk a lot of the time to whoever he felt like he could get away with it.
Yes.
Yeah. But we went from the reward pretty much straight to the immunity challenge, and it was just we were only 30 minutes into the episode by the time we were at the immunity challenge, which seemed fast to me.
Yes.
But I guess that's just how they wanted to balance the time this time.
Yeah. More interesting stuff in and after the immunity challenge, I guess.
Yeah. So this was a really interesting challenge too. I feel like they've done similar ones before, maybe not quite like this, but it was really kind of fascinating just because there's obviously so many different approaches, and what I think proved true is that the approach that lets you get, like, say, to the 2/3 point quickly, it doesn't work anymore once it gets that high, because it's too unsteady for you to move as fast as you were moving before.
Right.
And so that's part of why Sydney's technique, where she was being super slow all along, made her, like, she was way slower to get to that midpoint, but she didn't have to change up the way she was doing it. And now she had all that practice doing it that same way, instead of having to figure out what's the way to change it up once it starts being too unsteady. So I mean, it's kind of like the definition of the slow and steady wins the race sort of idea. Especially just because everybody, once they've spilled it once, gets flustered. I can only imagine it would be very difficult in something like this. Like, even if you can do it really quickly, to recover from having spilled your tower against someone who hasn't. You know what I mean? Like, even if you can do it fast enough that you could theoretically build it back up again, the amount of frustration and impatience you would feel trying to do it the second time would probably be counterproductive. Now, of course, if everybody has spilled it at least once, then, everybody's kind of in the same boat with that regard. But, that was a big advantage that she had, that she'd been moving so slow all along that she really never had to change it up.
Yeah. I mean, she was the only one who didn't spill it, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So that it's hard to count on that, though. So it's like,
well, right. Yeah.
It ended up working this time, but in, another situation, if she accidentally spills it and all she's been able to do is move slow, well, now she's in trouble.
Yeah.
And so I liked it because of that reason, because it was like, there's a complexity to it, in that it's not like there was a strategy that was better. It's executing your strategy correctly. Like, if you were able to move quickly through the first 2/3 and then make the adaptation, you would win.
Yeah.
But that's hard. But that's a harder strategy to execute. So she took a strategy that was more simple to execute, in which you move the same speed all the time, very slowly, very methodically. But had that small chance come in and she had tipped it, it would have completely thrown her out of it. Like, she would have been out of it. So
several people got very close before dropping it. Yes. I think at one point, well, I mean, even when she finally won, Jason, who had dropped it, I think, twice, was still, like, he was at the same point that she was.
Yes.
So she won, but not by a lot, and so he was, if he hadn't dropped it that last time, he probably would have won.
Yes.
But of course he did. And so ultimately she wins immunity, which good for her. I increasingly like Sydney as well. But at the same time, it's not necessarily the most interesting thing to happen from a strategic perspective, since nobody was really talking about voting for her, I don't think.
No. Well, not that we saw, yeah.
Right. Well, but I just mean even before she won the challenge, like, lots of times what will happen in an episode is we'll get discussion of a person in the context of like, well, so-and-so doesn't win immunity, then we're going to go after them or something like that. And so they build that suspense. But even before,
yeah, we saw nothing.
Yeah. Which is, it's interesting that she is just kind of really successfully managed to occupy this just slightly to the left of center position in the idea that, like, if Aubrey is perceived as, I don't know, I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's just a matter of she and Aubrey have successfully dominated the strategic part enough in the last several episodes that it's really everybody else jockeying to not be the next person to go. And nobody's really looking at dethroning the folks in power.
Yeah.
We also had Joe, unfortunately, getting a little flustered too, with not once, not twice, but 3 times getting all the way to the tower with the wrong letter.
Yeah. I feel like he paid more attention after the first time that happened.
What was funny too is that he kept bringing, like, the first time it was the first block he was bringing out, and the problem was that he wasn't spelling it backwards, right? Like, the problem is the last letter is supposed to go on the bottom, so you're technically spelling the word backwards. You bring out the last letter first and then so on, so that the first letter of the word goes on the top of the tower. And so it makes sense when you're bringing out your first block to accidentally bring out the first letter instead of the last letter. But then the other 2 times, I think he still kept bringing out the I, although there is more than one I, so who knows. In any case, Sydney wins the immunity. And so we pretty much, let's see, we're not already at Tribal Council, are we? Did we go to Tribal Council right after the challenge? I'm confused by my note. That doesn't feel right. No, because we definitely, so I have a note that says going into TC, but I think that I was just jumping the gun in my notes a little bit, because we definitely had lots of strategy discussion first.
Oh, yeah.
Because we had Ty, who had sort of made up his mind. I think part of his difficulty, honestly, is that he was doing better when he wasn't really trying to be active in the strategy, when he was kind of just floating, riding the wave, so to speak. But now that he's sort of engaged, he's really causing more problems. And honestly, the idea of voting out Michelle instead of Jason is not even a bad idea. It's kind of like Aubrey said. The problem is that when he was pitching it, like, no, I've decided, and that's why this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
That makes everybody frustrated and not happy with how things go. And so I kind of enjoyed Aubrey's her discomfort and frustration being in that position of, like, so the problem is I actually agree with his decision, but we can't let him be the one to make it for everybody else. It's one thing if we come to it as a consensus. It's another entirely if we're doing it because he came in and said so.
Yep.
So in any case, though, he comes and he's talking to Aubrey and Joe and maybe Sydney was there. I don't remember. Joe is kind of reluctant but not insistent. I think he's definitely more interested in getting rid of Jason just for camp morale. Um, Aubrey seems to be on board, but here's another one of the weird flaws that's just, it's an element of how this game is just weird and you can't always count on what's going on, which is Ty wanting to save Jason, at least for this time. Or it's not even about saving Jason. It's more about just like helping him to get one more vote to get out Michelle, who he thinks they should vote out. Tells Jason, we're going to try to vote for Michelle. If you vote for Michelle too, you make that more likely to happen. But he's going to be the only person to approach Jason with that because everybody else is more inclined to vote for Jason anyway. But Jason's in a position of like, why would I believe anything Ty tells me at this point? And as a result, he doesn't do it. Like, and just his vote wouldn't have made the difference in this case, but at the same time, just the idea of, turns out he was actually telling you the truth. It's also, it's not clear what Jason even thought was happening because, like, to vote for Joe, like, what was that supposed to accomplish?
Like, trying to make a point. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe he just figured he wasn't going to be able to make the difference either way. It was just they're going to decide what they decide, whether. Yeah. But at the same time, like I feel like he really kind of checked out. He kind of got this idea of like, oh well, maybe if I'm miserable, people will keep bringing me along. But he was not, I think, paying careful attention because he had to know Joe wasn't on the chopping block. So even like, it's one thing to say, well, it's to make a point, but it's like, why make a point when you could actually still have an impact?
Yeah, it's also true.
In any case, Joe and Sydney definitely want to get rid of Jason, but Joe doesn't want to argue about it. So he's maybe a little bit behind Aubrey in the sense of like, look, if everybody else wants to do Michelle, then I'm not like philosophically opposed to that. But I would rather it be Jason, and so let's not fight about it.
Right.
Sydney, though, I think perhaps still salty from Joe bossing her around earlier, is just feeling extra inclined to not want to be told what to do. I don't know if it's really connected at all to Joe bossing her around earlier, but certainly that's how she feels about the way Ty is presenting it. Maybe, it also occurs to me that given that Ty's intended final threes with Joe and Aubrey, maybe Sydney really feels kind of left out, like Ty is not working with her. If she can kind of tell that it's like, I know who you're really here with and it's not me, why I'm going to even be more inclined to be irritated if you're trying to tell me who to vote for. That's speculation, though. I don't think we've had anyone say that. Anything like that. Let's see. So in any case, Sydney is sufficiently annoyed by Ty that she goes to tell Michelle that Ty is trying to, lobby against her. And Michelle is dismayed by this, but honestly, there's not really a lot she can do. I mean, she's talking about doing damage control, but at the same time, I can't help but want to ask her what she means by that. Like, when you say damage control, like, what is the damage that you're trying to control there? That Ty wants to get you out? Because we didn't really see you trying to convince Ty of that. It seemed more like you're trying to convince everybody else not to listen to Ty, but that's a different argument.
Well, that's different than damage control, but it was effective. It was a part of what?
Right. Well, yeah, I think it was not her that changed their minds, but at the same time, her voice in that discussion was, a critical component. Because if everybody's choosing between Jason and Michelle making a nuisance of herself the way Jason is, everyone might have been more inclined to just say, we don't care how Ty said it because we agree that that's who should go.
Right.
So Sydney goes back to Aubrey and basically just says, look, I don't like what Ty's doing here. And this is where Aubrey kind of had another sort of like she didn't get too emotional about it, but it also just, I think part of what it is with her is just that she is maintaining this kind of head on a swivel awareness of the game, and she's doing pretty well at that, but that's just a stressful thing to maintain. So I think that's all that was about. So Sydney, though, puts her on the spot and basically just says, look, I see that you're conflicted, but here's the thing. It's going to come down to choosing them or choosing me. So, which is it? And on this, honestly, that's one of those funny things where, like, in this game is different than in real life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because in this game, the answer to is it them or is it me is always, well, of course it's you. I'm siding with you. Why would I side with them? If you're going to make me pick right now, I'm going to pick you. Because it doesn't have to be, true. Like it's like if she reassures you, yes, I'm with you, that doesn't actually, she's not actually casting her vote yet.
Right.
She might just be telling you what you want to hear. Or it might be true. But the point is that nobody, unless they're dumb, is ever going to say, nope, sorry, I've decided to go with them. But you have the rest of the afternoon to figure out what to do about that. But yeah, it's interesting, though, because I think making those sorts of ultimatums can be dangerous because sometimes people really react badly to that. And it can make them more inclined to go against you, regardless of what they say in the moment. But I think in this case, it may have actually just snapped Aubrey out of the indecision. You know what I mean? Of just saying, look, we're having this discussion. There's merit to both arguments, but my mind is made up. And I think you should vote with me, and then we'll get this thing done.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it anymore. This is what I'm going to do. So you're either doing it with me or you're going to screw everything up. So
I agree. I think Aubrey needed that. Like she was like waffling back and forth, and it's like, hey, you need to make a decision, and we don't have to wait till tribal council to figure it out. Like, just make a decision.
Mm-hmm. And so I think that was a calculated risk. Actually, it's funny. I just called it a calculated risk, but I think in a lot of respects, especially with that sort of thing, Sydney is kind of operating on instinct, which is not a criticism. It just means that it's the calculation is occurring in her intuition rather than sort of a cold, rational plotting out of the approach. So the idea of, making that move and presenting it in that way and getting the outcome she wanted, I don't think she, did math in her head ahead of time. It was more just a matter of that's what felt right in the moment, and her intuition bore out, accurate. Although, at the same time, as inseparable as Aubrey and Sydney have been for a while now, it's not clear that either of them wants to take the other to the final. Yes. Nor should they, honestly. So that's an interesting pair. I'm kind of excited to see how that's going to all shake out. Let's see. So now we're at tribal council. Michelle says that Ty is trying to dictate the vote, and also pointing out that like he has an idol and he has an advantage, and now he thinks he gets to just tell everybody what to do. And what really, like, not that things had been fine as far as how people were perceiving Ty before, but he really just kind of fell apart. Like, he's not, I think he is, because he doesn't ever act that way in normal life, he is so uncomfortable with having to defend himself of those sorts of allegations, especially when it's obvious that he understands that there's truth in it. He gets very defensive and flustered when people accuse him of things that he already feels a little bit bad about. And everybody is really putting him on the spot too. And I think he really just kind of, that became the whole conversation, like to the point where like they're talking about this whole thing, and there's a group and there's a smaller group, and you know, he ends up saying, well, Michelle wasn't even supposed to be in the alliance, and which I noted at the time. It's like, well, yeah, there's a way in which that's true, but it's also like that's one of those things that you're never supposed to actually say out loud. Because there's no good side, there's no good outcome, no gain to be had from saying that. But at the same time, Michelle is doing a pretty good job of going on the offensive here, of seeing that there's some blood in the water with the way of how Ty presented it, and really feeding into that, because even if it might increase the tension between herself and Ty, the point is that Ty was the one that wanted to get her out. So if everybody's going after Ty, that's good for her.
Right.
And it's not just a matter of getting attention off of her onto anyone else. It's specifically going after the person who was trying to get rid of you, even if he's not the one to be targeted this time. But after all of that, they have this whole long discussion, and then Probst just kind of goes, so, Jason. He's like, hey, Jeff, we haven't been talking about me. And then actually that's the end of my notes for the tribal council. It's just, after all that, Jason, hey, Jeff.
Yeah, but they haven't been talking about me. That's good. But
yeah,
they still voted for you because you were already a foregone conclusion.
Yeah.
And they were making, at least what I think, they were making a point to Ty.
Mm-hmm.
To don't boss us around. Hopefully, it's going to be interesting how that all shakes out, like how Ty takes that.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, the thing is, Ty has to remember that just because, like, having the idol and the extra advantage are this double-edged sword, and not just because of this element of, oh, well, it makes you a target because you have them, because that's true. So you can maybe even call it a triple-edged sword, because the other edge is for all the people who are allying with you, because being in an alliance with someone with those advantages gives you a kind of reflected advantage. It also might be true that that's the only reason that they're in an alliance with you. And if you don't have them anymore, or indicate that you're not willing to use them to help the other person, then they really are not with you anymore. It was not a real alliance because it was only based on a promise that is not being kept.
Which is kind of the scary part about this one, is that he tried to use his advantage to get rid of somebody who is, while he said she shouldn't have been in the alliance, she is in the alliance.
Yeah.
And he used an advantage to no avail to try to get rid of her.
Yeah, and she's still there.
And explain himself, which he's not good at.
Right. Now, of course, he does have an idol, and this next time is the last time he can use it, so for sure he's going to use it, which means that he can't be the one to go this next time.
Right.
But it's also just all the more reason that this idea that he was going to go to the final 3 with Joe and Aubrey is...
But from Aubrey's perspective, like, if she can better handle, like, whatever the time is where they get rid of Michelle, now you have another vote against Ty. Like, because she, like, you think Michelle's going to vote for him after he was like, yeah, she shouldn't have even been in the alliance, and I'm going to try to use my extra vote to get rid of her. Like, I'm going to flail. Like, that's how much I want her out. Like, she's going to be like, that's how much I don't want you to win.
Honestly, the fact that Ty couldn't read the writing on the wall and he still used his votes against Michelle, including his extra one, like, with all of the talk, everyone getting on him about this, like, might have been a better idea for him to just kind of say, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. Let me retreat a little bit. Maybe not use my... Or, you know what? Maybe he thought that everybody was going to actually... No, he couldn't have thought that everybody was going to vote for him, because then he would play the idol and not the extra vote.
Right.
Huh. Yeah, so I think that he honestly...
He's just not thinking things through.
Yeah.
Which you pointed out numerous times in this conversation. Like, he's just not strategically thinking things through, and when he's having to do this, like, it's all... And that's what I said earlier. Like, he's devolving to this emotional game.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I want to get out Michelle. I have the advantages.
Well,
so,
see, I'm not even sure it's devolving, though, because I'm not sure it was really ever anything else.
Yeah, I guess it was different when he was being instructed by people and he was doing what...
When he wasn't trying to make his own moves.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it.
I think the problem is that he was talked into making a big move and made it, and it worked. And he kind of mistook that for thinking that he knew how to play strategically. And I mean, you could take credit for that big move, sure, but it's also true that, like, you were talked into it by Aubrey by pitching it in an emotional context.
Yes.
But yeah, I think the problem ultimately for Ty, and this is not an indictment of him as a person, is just that temperamentally he's not well suited for this kind of a game because he has too much difficulty setting the emotion aside.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something everybody struggles with in this game. It's part of what makes it interesting, and he is just even less able to do that than most. Which in a real life context, that's not even a bad thing necessarily. It's just doesn't make you good at Survivor. But so in any case, I want to finish with just a repeated note of Jason was a dummy for voting for Joe, even if it wouldn't have made a difference.
Imagine, what if one other person had actually gone with them?
Yeah, it only would have taken one more.
Yeah.
Because, it could have been a tie.
It ended up as a tie, but still, yeah, you'd feel stupid. Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we'll see what happens.
Right. Yeah. We'll see. So, I think we're heading into some exciting stuff for the conclusion, especially since it does seem possible, at least, that we're looking at a final 2. If not, then there's got to be something going on to explain why the numbers are working out the way they are. But yeah, that would be interesting to get to that point. Because I think, if I recall correctly, the last time they did a final 2 instead of a 3, it was really exciting because one of the remaining contestants, I want to say Amanda, had basically this total meltdown because she had kind of prepared herself emotionally to make all of the decisions she needed to make up until the final 3, and then to have to then further make another decision kind of broke her a little bit, and she never really recovered.
Yeah, that sounds right. Because we're at 5 now.
Yeah. So this coming week, we're going to go from 5 to 4. We're going to go into the finale with only 4 people.
So 4 to 3, 3 to 2. Yeah.
That's how it would usually go anyway. It's possible that something else takes enough time that they only do 1 elimination and still do a final 3. But then we have to wonder what's going to fill all that extra time compared to how they usually do them. Well, we'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see. So I guess we'll be back after the next episode. Thank you, everybody, for listening and or watching, and we'll be back.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.